Joining us now is freelance journalist and investigative reporter Amy Littlefield, who covers and focuses on the intersection of religion and healthcare. Amy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So you wrote a lengthy piece, and it's a devastating piece, but such an important story to report on, about the legality of abortion in some areas of Mexico and how difficult it is for women to obtain abortions, even when it's legalized in the area that they live in. So can you just give us a quick summary of what you found in your reporting on this story?
Yeah, so this story is first and foremost about a remarkable young woman who we call Patricia. She was 16 years old when she was raped by a taxi driver in her neighborhood on the outskirts of Guadalajara, Mexico's second largest city, which is located in Mexico's conservative heartland. And abortion is criminalized through most of Mexico, including in Jalisco state. But when Patricia found out that she was pregnant as a result of this rape, she told her mother, Alma, and Alma knew that it was her daughter's legal right to access an abortion in Jalisco state under a rape exception that had been on the books in Jalisco since 1933. What Alma and Patricia didn't know when they set out to access this legal abortion in Jalisco state is that throughout the state's entire recorded history until that year, 2016, no one had actually obtained an abortion under the rape exception, even though it was a legal right. So it ended up being a 22-day-long harrowing journey for Alma and Patricia to secure this legal right to an abortion, from the day that they reported the rape to prosecutors until the day when Patricia finally had her abortion in a public hospital. It was 22 days during which they encountered the legal director at the public health department, who handed them a foil packet of misoprostol, an abortion-inducing medication, and told them not to tell anybody about it. Mm-hmm. The dosing instructions that he gave them for this medication were incorrect. When Patricia took pills in that packet and they didn't work, they ended up in the hospital where a doctor gave them an unmarked bottle of medication and told them that they shouldn't get caught with it or they could end up getting arrested. And again, this was a legal abortion that they were accessing in a public hospital. That was just the beginning of this harrowing 22-day-long ordeal before Patricia finally was able to get an abortion that was her right under the law.
You know, the part of your piece that really, I can't forget about it. It really bothered me. I mean, this whole story bothered me, obviously, but the way that she was treated by the nurses in that hospital, you know, we're talking about a 16-year-old who was raped. She has the legal ability to get an abortion. And can you just talk a little bit about how the nurses treated her?
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. So when Patricia is finally admitted to the hospital after being treated like what she's doing is a crime, even though it's fully legal in the state, first the doctor tells her that they're gonna have to basically induce labor in order for her to pass this pregnancy, because in his words, they don't have baby grinders, which is how he describes the medication, the equipment that's needed to perform a surgical abortion. Then for 12 hours, basically, Patricia is having painful contractions, passing her pregnancy. At one point, a doctor comes by and withholds pain medication, she believes punitively. A nurse came by and told her that the rape wasn't the baby's fault. At one point, 15 medical students came and clustered around her bed, treating her like she was an experiment. She had well over a dozen vaginal exams, many of them painful. She was in the maternity ward surrounded by people who were in labor, and she could hear them, and they would not let her mother in the room with her.
Oh my God.
So it was this really traumatizing ordeal, which Patricia and Alma really concluded was intended to punish her for trying to seek an abortion that, again, was her legal right and had been since 1933 in that state.
So what I thought was fascinating is how she was the first to obtain an abortion since that law had passed because of the protections for rape victims. And it's not really that shocking when you think about what you would have to do in order to obtain the abortion under those circumstances, right? You would have to come forward and somehow prove to prosecutors that you became pregnant as the result of a rape. And so that is not an easy thing to do. There are so many rape victims in this country, both men and women, who don't feel comfortable talking about their experience at all. They haven't even talked to a family member or someone close to them about it because there is, unfortunately, shame associated with that. And so then that made me think about the United States, right? And some of the parallels that we see here in the US. Now, as we know, Roe v. Wade provides protections for women seeking abortions, but slowly but surely we have the religious right wing in this country trying to do away with those protections. And so, you do such great reporting about the intersection of religion and healthcare. Can you talk a little bit about how our rights are being encroached upon here in the US in a very similar way?
I'm so glad you brought that up because I think there are some really chilling parallels where Patricia's story can become a cautionary tale for those of us who are watching the historic erosion of abortion rights in the United States. It's remarkable. My colleague Laura Gottesdiener and I were reporting this story in Mexico in September of 2018. So in the mornings, we were watching the Kavanaugh hearings in our hotel. We were watching this looming threat to abortion access in the United States. And then in the afternoons, we were going out and interviewing these abortion activists in Mexico, abortion rights activists in Mexico, who are dealing with this reality where abortion is largely criminalized. But we have to remember that here in the United States, we've seen women go to jail for miscarriage and other pregnancy outcomes. Yep. We've seen lawmakers introduce legislation in Texas recently to implement the death penalty for women who have abortions. We have a president who's called for people who have abortions to be punished. So we can't think that we're all that different. And what I really hope people take away from Patricia's story is the extent to which within a landscape where abortion is heavily restricted or criminalized, the rape exception is really a false promise because what you're doing, as you pointed out, is you're forcing the most vulnerable people, traumatized survivors of sexual violence, to go through a system that is hostile, that is unwilling and unequipped to deal with their medical and emotional needs. And I think in the United States, the rape exception has long been a fixture of anti-choice legislation because it's a way for everyone from Trump to the state lawmakers who are implementing this legislation at the state level to say, hey, it's not that extreme. We've got this exception in there for rape and incest victims. When Alabama failed to have a rape and incest exception in their recent abortion ban that they passed in May, there was a national outcry over it. And yet I think it can be this false security blanket because if you are in a context where abortion is otherwise heavily restricted, as we see in Mexico, that right doesn't actually meaningfully exist, except, on paper.
Exactly. And what I always find so ironic about these violations of women's rights and the right to choose is what's proposed actually puts a lot of lives at risk, right? I mean, in the case of Patricia, the medication she was given in order to abort the fetus, you're right. I mean, they gave her the wrong instructions on how to take it, and she was instructed to insert, the pills vaginally, and that led to her getting very sick, and she was hospitalized as a result. She could have lost her life. And so, does that ever come up in any of your reporting? Like, do any of the religious individuals who are pushing for these restrictions realize that they're being hypocritical and they're actually putting more people in danger by passing this type of or pushing for these types of restrictions?
That's such an important point, and a real underlying thread in Patricia's story is that time after time she was encountering medical providers who were imposing their religious beliefs on her, their own moral beliefs about abortion, and they were using that to, threaten and withhold medical care from her. Well, in the United States, nearly every state in this country has a law on the books that protects not patients like Patricia, but protects medical providers and institutions that want to deny abortion and other reproductive health care on religious grounds. And under the Trump administration, this has just accelerated. We've seen vast new powers for not just religiously inclined medical providers and individuals, but the institutions, religious institutions, to deny care on religious grounds. You know, I've reported for years on Catholic hospitals, which make up 1 in 6 acute care beds in this country. And I've talked to women who have almost died in these institutions because even when they are miscarrying and inevitably losing a pregnancy, the hospital, under its religious rules, often won't perform an abortion to end the pregnancy that is inevitably being lost because of these religious rules that are written by bishops that these hospitals follow. So, you know, no, I mean, I think in terms of whether there's an understanding of hypocrisy there, I think these institutions actually believe that they are implementing religious rules that they are supposed to follow and quote unquote moral, beliefs. But we have seen time after time in this country that lives have been placed at risk in the name of religion. And under the Trump administration, these institutions and providers are getting more power than ever before to deny a broad range of care on religious grounds.
Yeah, I mean, elections matter. Who we elect, who they choose as Supreme Court justices, that has a lasting impact on our lives. It's so incredibly important, as is your reporting here. Amy Littlefield, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. And everyone, please check out her piece. It's titled, "When Abortion After Rape is Legal but Nearly Impossible to Obtain." Again, Amy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.